Hey guys, welcome back. Today is another beautiful, beautiful day in the garden, and we are going to be doing a little bit of planting and a little bit of cleaning up around some of our containers. I mainly want to just deadhead some things, but we have some beautiful flowers that we are going to be planting today into the landscape, which I'm very excited about. And it's also time because some of these things have been in their containers for a while. Some of these peonies that we're going to be working with today, I planted, oh gosh, maybe like 2 years ago as bare root, and they've been sitting in their container. They bloomed once, but they haven't bloomed since because they obviously need to just go out into the ground. So we're going to get them into the ground today. I have a few different varieties that I want to show you. We'll talk a little bit about peonies, and then we have some geums that Sergey picked up this last weekend at the Garden Palooza. He loves geums. This boy, I don't know what it is about those flowers, but he loves geums. He loves Gara. Anything that's kind of whimsical, he's really into. So we are going to get those into the ground today. So let me show you the varieties that we have, and then we'll talk a little bit about them, and then we will just get planting. All right, here is our lineup for today. Now, a couple of these we picked up at local farms at Adam's Peony Garden. And I've just had them for quite a bit of time, and I just need to get them into the ground. We do have quite a few in the garden that I'll actually show you guys once they're in bloom so you can see the beautiful flowers that they bloom into. But these are just ones that I had left over that I never got into. I wish these guys were blooming so you could see how beautiful these flowers are, but they are budded up, so I'm excited to see them bloom in our garden this year. We have a couple of herbaceous peonies here. We have Walter Main and Festiva Maxima. Walter Main is a beautiful, like deep red. It almost kind of resembles a peony, or reminds me of a peony because it has like these frilly yellow and red center in it, and it's just such a gorgeous, gorgeous flower. The Festiva Maxima is kind of a white with a little bit of blush tones in it, and it has a beautiful, beautiful scent. One thing that I love about peonies is if you can find a scented one, highly, highly recommend because they have a gorgeous scent to them. The last three peonies that we have here are an Edo peony, and we have Bartzilla and Canary Brilliant. I really enjoyed the Canary because that one is a little bit more of a peachy tone, and it has really beautiful foliage. It bloomed for us last year, not a ton because again these just need to get into the ground. And the Bartzilla is a little bit more on the yellow side, but it's still a really soft yellow. It's not super, super bright, so I think that is going to look really beautiful in the landscape. Now, when you're selecting your peonies for your garden, you have to consider the three varieties that there are because that will also help you determine how you're going to care for them in the fall time, winter time, springtime, etc. So there are three categories of peonies. There's the herbaceous one. Those are the ones that die back, that you cut down to the ground in late fall. And within the herbaceous peony category, there are two subcategories. There's the hybrid and then the lactiflora. The second category of peonies are going to be tree peonies. Now, those are the ones that lose their leaves in the fall time and winter time, but they do not lose their woody stem. Those stay above ground, and you don't cut those back all the way down to the ground. And then the third category of peonies are going to be the Edo peonies, and those are basically a combination of herbaceous and tree peonies, and they're beautiful. There are some beautiful, gorgeous flowers within that category of peonies. I'm always looking for a good one to add into our garden. Peonies usually grow better in cooler climates, typically zones 3 through 8, depending on the different varieties that you're looking at. But in general, you do want to make sure that you're planting them in an area that's going to receive full sun at a minimum of 6 to 8 hours. If you have peonies that are being casted by any sort of shade or any shadows, they typically will grow and have beautiful foliage, but they won't bloom their flowers. So if you have ones right now in your garden, it could be that they're just getting too much shade or not enough sun, or they could also be planted too deeply. That is another thing to consider when you're planting peonies, whether you're doing roots or the actual plants. You don't want to plant them too deep. So I get questions a lot about, I have peonies, I've had them for a few years in my garden, they get full sun, but they're not blooming. Usually it's because they're planted way too deep. So consider that when you're planting your peonies in your garden this year. Now, peonies have been adored for over 4,000 years. They are one of the most dramatic and beautiful and adored flowers in our garden. The peonies that we have today and the ones that are in my landscape are for my landscape and for my garden. However, I do use some of them as cut flowers. And if you are getting into the cut flower space and you have a ton of space, I highly recommend you looking into growing peonies in rows. One, they are such such a productive flowering perennial once they get going. And two, they're highly profitable. If you ever go into a grocery store or a florist and you look for peony bunches, you will quickly see that they're very expensive. So if you have the space to grow them out in rows, I highly recommend you do that. And of course, I can point you in the right direction or answer any questions that you have down below in terms of growing them as a production field. I have a lot of friends that do it. And so I've learned quite a bit from them, which is very interesting versus when you're just growing them out in the landscape. The other flowering perennials that we are going to be growing out today are these geums. And these are actually such little fun flowers to grow. They're a really great shrub. They're evergreen for us for the most part, and they produce the sweetest little blooms that I actually like to use in arrangements as well. I absolutely love these little flowers, and they get pretty massive once they've established into the ground. The first variety that we are going to be growing is going to be this Tempo Rose geum. And let's see, it requires full sun. It gets 16 to 20 inches tall, 10 to 12 inches wide, and they are hardy down to zone 5. And then the other variety that we have is going to be this one here, which is a pretty coat peach. And let's see, this one can take sun to part shade. It gets 10 inches tall, 20 inches wide, and is hardy in zones 4 through 9. Now, geums are such a beautiful addition into the garden. I highly recommend you add them if you don't have them. And again, you can use their little flowers as cut flowers. They're really going to be that airy accent in a bouquet. I absolutely love them. The one thing that I have seen with them, at least that's been my experience, is that they get a little bit of powdery mildew towards the end of summertime. So I will come in and spray them preventatively. And it's not every year, but last year I noticed it, and the year before that, I noticed it too. The year before that, they were fine. So hopefully these are going to be okay in our garden. But if you have an area that's really high humidity, that can happen. So just kind of keep your eye out for that so you can catch it early on, and so you're not being reactive. Instead, try to be proactive. All right, now that we have that out of the way, let's get down to the fun part, which is the planting. I have an idea of where I want to get these planted into. So let's go ahead and place them, kind of walk around, see where I think they would look good, and then we will get them in the ground. Now, I'm really kicking myself because there are a couple that I planted last year, and I can't remember which ones, and so I'm waiting to see how they're going to bloom. But I was thinking one over here, the Festiva Maxima, because that is a white, and I don't think I have anything white over here in this area. So I'm thinking that one over there. I will say, when you're planting your peonies into your garden, think about what companion plants you have around them or you plan on planting around them. Peonies look really beautiful with roses, delphinium, clematis, lupine, anything that kind of has like a spiky texture to it or structure to it, they do really well. I just think with roses and clematis, that's kind of like a classic companion pairing. So we are going to be planting another clematis over here right behind it, because the one that I have there is like, she's just not doing very well. I just did a bad job at taking care of that clematis. And so I'd like to come in with something a little bit more, oh gosh, what is the word I'm looking for? A little bit more robust than what we have right here. Because again, it's just not doing very good. It's very small, and yeah. Anyways, so think about that when you're planting your peonies around your garden. Do you have an area that you could maybe tuck in a rose, or could you plant it next to a clematis or a delphinium? So those are just a couple of companion plants that work really well with peonies. All right, this Walter's Mane I think would go really pretty right over here. I'll just take a step back. Yeah, I like it over there. I'm thinking our canary right back here. Let's see, maybe right here. I'm trying to remember what I have. I have lilies there. I think coneflowers right there. Yeah, let's go with it. I think the Bartzella over here by our Japanese pine, I'm thinking would be good. Maybe a little bit more forward right there. Okay. Let's hang on to this last one for a minute and see where we should plant it. And then we will place our geums once we get everything else planted. One quick thing I wanted to mention is peonies like a rich, fertile soil. and something that's well draining. So just keep that in mind when you're selecting a site in your garden to plant your peonies in. I'm gonna go ahead and just add a little bit of biotone just to get these roots a good kick start. All right, I'm planting this a little bit high, and we have a lot of compost over here, so I don't have to really add anything. And I don't want to go too low because, again, we don't want them too deep, and we still have to mulch this area. Looks good to me. All right, we got everything planted and cleaned up. Let's walk around and see how everything is looking. Starting over here, we got 2 peonies planted. I think these are going to look so lovely back here. This one, I am not sure if it's going to flower this year because I don't see any buds on the plant at all, but that's okay because I still enjoyed the foliage a lot. And then this one should bloom for us because this one does have blooms. They're little, but they're there. We got our Tempo Rose geums planted right under our red bud. When I'm planting perennials that are somewhat of an evergreen for us here in Zone 8B, I typically will plant them under or near trees that are deciduous. That way, although these do lose their leaves during the wintertime, we have some interest going on in the bottom in terms of winter interest. So that's something to keep in mind when you're planting around trees or like I have here right kind of underneath them. Think about what's deciduous, what could I add underneath that's going to add either fall interest, spring interest, or winter interest in this case. We planted our Walter Main peony right over here. I think this is going to fill in nicely and it's going to bring a pop of color in this corner of the garden. So I'm looking forward to that. I tucked in the canary over here by one of our figs, and I believe I have, like I said, I think there's some coneflowers kind of scattered through here that we planted last year together. It does get quite a bit of sun. Right now we're kind of at sunset. That's why there's no sun right there, but it will get full sun. And then we planted the other peach geums right under here, again, under our fig tree because it's deciduous. And these should be somewhat of an evergreen for us in our zone. And again, I think these are just the sweetest little flower, especially this one. This one's like a double. And they just get tall and just kind of mound over and just have a beautiful umbrella of flowers. We didn't do too much to our containers. We only got to 2 of them, but I just like to come in periodically and just clean things out, prune back the ranunculus. That way we can keep them blooming and they don't start fizzling out too quickly for us. And I just like to get all of like the dead flowers. That way it just looks clean, especially for us because it rains a lot. Things start to stick to each other and it doesn't look quite as neat. But these are just still going for it, still going at it. The persimmon's loving it. They're coming in, starting to leaf out. So this is going to be such a beautiful addition to the garden. And back here, the same thing. We just cleaned up this container a little bit. I noticed some of the foliage was getting a little bit yellow, so I just pruned that back and just pruned back a little bit of the bacopa, some of the pansies and violas too, and of course the ranunculus as well. In terms of care for the peonies, I'm just gonna go ahead and get them watered in. They will have drip to them, so they're going to get regular watering along with our other plants. In terms of fertilizing, I will come in and sprinkle a little bit of flower tone after they're done blooming. I found that that helps feed the plant for next year's bloom. So it's something that I like to do for our peonies. Of course, we also feed them in the late springtime as well, or early spring, late springtime as well. So you don't have to go too crazy. They're not very fussy plants once they're established, which is nice. And make sure you're deadheading them once they're done blooming, because you don't want them to be sending energy to producing seeds. You want it to send that energy to grow the plant bigger for next year's blooms. And in terms of support, this is what I like to use. These are actually old tomato cages that we had, and I just had Sergey cut them down for me. You can buy supports like this, and this is what I prefer. There are other ones that I'll link down below. That's a grow through, which just kind of comes, it has a grid on the top, and then you attach it to 4 legs or 3 or 4 legs. I can't remember. But anyways, I don't really love those. I kind of like these. I like the ease of these better. And I typically will cut some of our blooms so they're not going to flop over. However, if you are truly going to plant peonies to have in your landscape, you do want to support them, because the bigger they get, the heavier they're going to get, and they're just going to flop over and not look very beautiful for you. One of the questions that I always get asked about peonies when we cut them and bring them in is, how do you bring them in without the ants? Typically, peony buds will have ants on them, and I'm sure you guys have seen this in your plants, and it's because there's a sweet nectar at the bud. Ants don't support your peonies to bloom. I believe that's a myth. I'm pretty sure it's a myth. So if you do see ants or you don't see ants, that's not going to impact whether or not your peonies bloom. So don't worry about that. But for the most part, when I cut our peonies, I usually like to harvest them at the marshmallow stage. And we'll show you guys that once we're getting ready to harvest some of them for arrangements. So I will just kind of rinse them off if there are ants on there. I don't spray anything. I don't treat it for ants or anything like that. It does not harm the plant. So if you are adding peonies to your garden and you're new to them and you see ants on the buds, don't worry, they're not going to do anything bad. They're just there for that sweet nectar that the peonies are providing them. So here's an example. You can see that it might be a little bit hard to see, but there's a bunch of little ants around this bud, and they're not harming the plant at all. I just let them be, and if I harvest our peonies and I see that there are ants on them, I just rinse it off with water, and that's really it. Anyways, I think that will do it for today's video. I am so happy that I'm getting these in the ground. I have been procrastinating getting these things planted, and I'm finally like, it's time. The time has arrived. Let's start planting things instead of just buying things. So I am very proud of myself. I'm taking baby steps to get all of our plant inventory that we have in front of the house, on the side of the house, in front of our primary bedroom window. So we're slowly making an impact in terms of not having so many plants lying around and getting them in the landscape so we can start enjoying them, and so they can start to be happier and not just in containers, you know, their whole life. So anyways, I would love to hear about your guys' gardens, and if you have peonies, and if so, which varieties? Are there ones that you absolutely love that you would recommend? Because I do hope to get some, hopefully this year, to add to our side garden, which I'm very, very excited about, and also for the front in the planting strip, which hopefully, again, that's another project that we will get to this year. So anyways, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today in my garden, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.